The broken ship nobody wanted until humans arrived. The impossible repair. The abandoned station. The Viridian orbital station floated like a forgotten monument at the edge of explored space. Once a thriving hub for interstellar trade, it now sat dark and silent, with only emergency lights flickering through its corridors. Most species had abandoned it 3 cycles ago when the central power core began failing. The station was dying, and everyone knew it. Commander Thextal of the Kryn Empire stood in the observation deck, his 4 arms crossed in frustration. Behind him, his engineering team, the best minds from 6 different species, stared at holographic displays showing the same impossible problem they'd faced for months. "It cannot be done," said Chief Engineer Vorith, her crystalline body pulsing with frustrated orange light. "The quantum harmonics are completely destabilized. Every simulation ends in catastrophic failure. We've tried 17,000 different approaches." Thextal's mandibles clicked irritably. "The Council will not accept failure. This station guards the primary trade route to the core worlds. Without it, shipping costs will increase by 40%. Then the Council should build a new station," Vorith replied flatly. "This one is beyond saving. The core is cracked in 7 places. The quantum field generators are out of phase. And the temporal stabilizers are degrading at an exponential rate. In 2 weeks, this station will tear itself apart." A young Kryn officer approached nervously. "Commander, there's a ship requesting docking permission." Thextal barely glanced up. "Deny it. We're not accepting civilian traffic." "Sir, they say they're here to help with the repairs." That got everyone's attention. Vorith's body flashed bright red, the crystalline equivalent of laughter. "Help? Who would be foolish enough to think they could succeed where we have failed?" The officer hesitated. "They're human, sir." The room fell silent. Humans. The newcomers. The species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. The ones who still used chemical propellants and physical tools while other species had moved on to pure energy manipulation centuries before. The unlikely engineers. 20 minutes later, Thextal watched through the docking port window as the human ship completed its approach. It was an ugly vessel, all exposed pipes and welded patches, clearly built for function over form. As the airlock cycled, he prepared himself for disappointment. The first human through was a woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical knot. She wore coveralls stained with what looked like engine grease and carried a battered toolbox that appeared to be held together with adhesive tape. "Commander Thextal?" she asked, extending a hand. "I'm Sarah Chen, Chief Engineer of the Cargo Hauler Determination. This is my team." Behind her came 5 more humans, each carrying similar worn toolboxes and wearing the same practical, stained clothing. They looked nothing like the sleek, technology-enhanced beings Thextal was used to working with. "Ms. Chen," Thextal replied carefully, not taking the offered hand. He wasn't familiar with the gesture. "I'm told you believe you can repair our power core." "Not believe," Sarah said with a slight smile. "We can repair it. Question is, will you let us try?" Vorith materialized beside them, her crystalline form radiating skepticism. "You understand this is a quantum temporal fusion core? Not one of your primitive chemical reactors?" Sarah's smile never wavered. "Ma'am, I've been working on fusion systems since I was 16. My daddy taught me on jury-rigged cores that shouldn't have worked according to any physics textbook. And they ran for 30 years anyway." "Impossible," Vorith stated. "The mathematics." "Sometimes math tells you what should work in a perfect universe," Sarah interrupted gently. "But we don't live in a perfect universe. We live in one where things break, where tolerances drift, where you've got to make do with what you have." She patted her toolbox. "That's where humans excel." The inspection. Thextal decided to humor them. What harm could it do? In 2 weeks, the station would be destroyed anyway. He led the human team to the core chamber, where the massive power plant hummed and crackled with unstable energy. Sarah's team spread out immediately, their eyes scanning the equipment with an intensity that surprised him. They didn't pull out advanced scanners or quantum analyzers. Instead, they used simple handheld devices, some that looked centuries old, and did something Thextal had never seen engineers do before. They listened. One of the humans, a large man named Marcus, pressed his ear against a coolant pipe. Another, a young woman called Jean, held her hand near a power conduit without touching it, feeling the heat fluctuations. Sarah herself walked slowly around the core, occasionally stopping to tap on a panel with a small metal tool. "Your diagnostic is wrong," Sarah said after 15 minutes. Boritha's body flashed angry red. "Excuse me?" "The crack in Sector 7 isn't the primary problem," Sarah continued, pointing at a holographic display. "It's a symptom. Your real issue is here." She indicated a junction that their scans had marked as stable. "That junction passed all tests," Borith insisted. "Tests can lie," Marcus rumbled, walking over. "Or rather, tests tell you what you asked them to measure. They don't tell you what you didn't think to ask." He pointed at the junction. "That connection is operating within normal parameters, sure. But it's creating a harmonic resonance with the quantum field that's slowly tearing the core apart." That's not possible," Boris said, but her color had shifted to uncertain yellow. Jean pulled out an ancient-looking oscilloscope and clipped it to the junction. The readout made Boritha's color turn pure white, shock. "The frequency pattern, how did we miss this?" "The impossible solution." "Because you were looking for complex problems," Sarah explained. "Sometimes the simple explanation is the right one. This junction is standard issue, sure. But it was installed at the wrong angle. Probably just a few degrees off. Over time, that tiny misalignment created a resonance cascade. But our precision instruments would have detected any misalignment," Thextal protested. "Your instruments measure within acceptable tolerances," Sarah agreed. "And technically, this installation is within those tolerances. But there's a difference between acceptable and optimal. Humans learned that the hard way when we were still building chemical rockets. A tiny vibration, a small angle deviation, things that passed inspection, could destroy a ship." She opened her toolbox and pulled out what looked like a simple wrench. "So we learned to trust our instincts, our senses, our experience. We learned that sometimes you need to feel the machine, not just scan it." "You're proposing to fix a quantum temporal fusion core with hand tools?" Boritha's voice carried disbelief. "And some replacement parts," Sarah said cheerfully. "The core isn't broken beyond repair. It just needs someone willing to get their hands dirty and do the work that fancy scanners say isn't necessary." Thextal's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Every instinct told him this was absurd. Humans with their primitive tools and intuitive engineering couldn't succeed where advanced quantum analysis had failed. It violated everything he knew about technology and progress. But they'd found something in 15 minutes that his team had missed in months. And in 2 weeks, this station would be gone anyway. "How long will the repairs take?" he asked. Sarah glanced at her team, who nodded. 72 hours. Non-stop work. We'll need access to your fabrication facilities for some custom parts." "You have it," Thextal decided. "If you fail." "We won't," Sarah said simply. "Failure isn't something humans do well with. We're too stubborn." As the human team began unloading more equipment from their ship, including actual physical wrenches, welding torches, and diagnostic tools that looked like museum pieces, word spread through the station. Aliens from a dozen species came to watch the humans work with a mixture of amusement and skepticism. But as hours turned into days, the amusement faded. The humans worked with a precision that belied their crude tools, a coordination that needed no quantum communication arrays, and a determination that never wavered through exhaustion or setbacks. And slowly, impossibly, the station's power readings began to stabilize. The human touch. The watch. By the second day, the observation gallery overlooking the core chamber had become a permanent gathering place. Engineers from every species on the station stood watching the humans work, trying to understand what they were witnessing. "They've been working for 36 hours straight," one Kryn engineer whispered. "Don't they need rest?" "Humans can push their bodies beyond normal limits using chemical stimulants," Boreth explained. She'd barely left the gallery herself, fascinated despite her initial skepticism. But that's not what's remarkable. Watch how they work together. In the core chamber below, the 6 humans moved like a single organism. Sarah would call out an instruction, and the right tool would appear in her hand without her looking, passed by Jean or Marcus. When Marcus needed to reach an access panel too high for easy access, 2 other humans were already positioning a lift platform before he asked. "They're not using communicators," Thextal observed. "How do they coordinate?" "Experience," Sarah's voice came through the open comm channel. She glanced up at the gallery and smiled. "When you work with the same team long enough, you develop shorthand. You know what needs to happen next. Plus, we talk to each other like people, not like data nodes." "Inefficient," one of the crystalline engineers muttered. "Is it?" Jean called up without pausing in her work. "Your species achieves perfect information transfer through quantum entanglement. Beautiful, elegant, fast. But when that system fails, you're lost. We humans, we're messy, we're redundant, we have 5 different ways to say the same thing. But that means when one method fails, we adapt." She held up a power coupling that was visibly damaged. "Like this. Your specifications say this part can't be repaired, only replaced. But you don't have replacements, and manufacturing new ones would take weeks." "Correct," Boreth confirmed. "That's one of the reasons we declared the station unsalvageable." Jean grinned and pulled out what looked like an ancient soldering iron. "Humans learn to make do. Watch. The repair." What Jean did next would be discussed in engineering circles for years. She took the damaged coupling, heated specific points with her primitive tool, and used a metal compound to rebuild the crystalline lattice structure. It shouldn't have worked. The materials weren't compatible according to any database. The technique violated 3 laws of quantum mechanics. But it worked. "How?" Boreth breathed. "Because theory and practice don't always match," Jean replied. "Theory says this shouldn't work because the quantum states are incompatible. But practical experience says if you introduce a buffer material and create microscopic channels for energy dispersion, you can make incompatible things work together." "Where did you learn this?" Thextal asked. "Necessity," Sarah answered for her. "Humans spent the first 40 years of space travel breaking things and learning to fix them with whatever we had on hand. When you're 3 months from the nearest port and your life support fails, you don't wait for the perfect part. You improvise." Marcus added, "Every human ship has what we call a junk box, random parts, materials, tools that officially have no purpose. But any experienced engineer knows that junk box will save your life someday." By the 3rd day, the impossible was becoming reality. The core's quantum harmonics had stabilized. The temporal fluctuations were decreasing. The cracks in the containment field were being systematically repaired using techniques that combined cutting-edge human innovation with what the other species considered obsolete methods. The philosophy. During a brief rest period, Sarah had finally forced her team to take 4 hours of sleep. Thextal found himself in the station's cantina with the human engineer. She was drinking something that smelled acidic and eating what looked like compressed nutrient paste. "Why?" he asked simply. Sarah looked up. "Why what? Why are you here? This station's failure doesn't affect human space. You're not being paid, you refused compensation. You've worked yourselves nearly to exhaustion. Why?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, staring into her cup. "Because it matters," she finally said. "Because when I was 23, my ship had a core failure. We were going to die. And a Kryn engineer named Velxton spent 2 days straight working to save us. He didn't know us. We couldn't pay him. But he said something I never forgot." "What did he say?" "He said, space is already trying to kill us all. We don't need to help it. Then he fixed our ship and refused payment. Said we should pay it forward someday. She smiled at Thextel's expression. Humans remember kindness, Commander. And we believe in paying our debts. Not just to individuals, but to the universe itself. That's illogical, Thextel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But humans learned early that logic isn't everything. We survived as a species not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we worked together. Because we helped each other even when it wasn't logical. That instinct is built into us now. The success. On the morning of the fourth day, Sarah's team gathered in the core chamber one last time. They'd replaced 17 major components, repaired 43 subsystems, and rebuilt 12 power junctions using techniques that would revolutionize engineering across 6 species. Core initialization in 3, 2, 1, Jean counted down. The massive power plant hummed to life. But this time, the sound was different, smooth, steady, powerful. The quantum field stabilized at 98% efficiency. The temporal fluctuations dropped to negligible levels. The cracks in the containment field sealed themselves as the properly balanced energy flow restored the core's structural integrity. The observation gallery erupted in cheers, a sound that transcended species barriers. Boratha's crystalline body shone brilliant blue, pure joy. It's perfect, she whispered. Better than when it was first installed. Sarah wiped grease from her forehead and grinned. That's the human touch. We don't just fix things. We make them better. The lesson. A week later, as the human team prepared to depart, Thextel stood in the docking bay with what felt like the entire station's population. Word had spread across trade networks about what had happened. The impossible repair. The human team that succeeded where advanced civilizations failed. We owe you a debt, Thextel said formally. No debt, Sarah replied. Just promise me something. What? Next time someone tells you something is impossible, remember that impossible is just another word for nobody's been stubborn enough to try yet. And maybe give the new ideas a chance before you dismiss them. She handed Vorath a battered notebook. This contains everything we did, all our techniques, all our illogical solutions. Share it. Teach it. Let other species learn what we learned the hard way. Vorath accepted the notebook reverently. This will change how we approach engineering. Good, Sarah said. Because the universe doesn't care about your elegant theories or your perfect simulations. It cares about what works. And sometimes, what works is a human with a wrench and the stubborn belief that nothing is truly unfixable. As the determination undocked and headed back to human space, every screen on the station showed the same message, written in 30 languages. Thank you, humans. You showed us that progress isn't about leaving old methods behind. It's about knowing when to combine wisdom with innovation, experience with technology, and logic with heart. The legacy. 6 months later, engineering academies across the galaxy had established new programs teaching what they called practical adaptive engineering, the human approach of combining intuition with analysis, simple tools with advanced technology, and stubborn determination with creative problem-solving. The Viridian Station became a training center where young engineers from every species came to learn not just from databases and simulations, but from experienced mentors who taught them to listen to machines, to trust their instincts, and to never accept that something is impossible just because it's difficult. And in her workshop on Mars, Sarah Chen received a message from Vorath. The crystalline engineer had been appointed head of the new interspecies engineering cooperative. She wanted Sarah to help develop their curriculum. Sarah smiled as she read the message, then looked around at her team, all working on their next project, repairing a supposedly unfixable quantum drive for a colony ship. Hear that, everyone, she called out. We're now officially teachers. Marcus laughed from under a console. Teaching the galaxy that impossible is just another challenge to overcome? Exactly, Sarah agreed. Because that's what humans do best. We take the word impossible, we examine it from every angle, we hit it with a wrench a few times, and then we prove it wrong. Jean grinned. And if the wrench doesn't work, we use duct tape. And if duct tape doesn't work, one of the younger team members asked. The entire team answered in unison, we improvise. Because that was the lesson humanity brought to the galaxy. Not superior technology or advanced theories, but something more fundamental, the understanding that every problem has a solution if you're willing to work hard enough, think creatively enough, and refuse to accept failure. The other species had forgotten that truth in their millennia of advancement. They'd become so focused on perfection that they'd lost the ability to adapt, to improvise, to make something good enough work when perfect wasn't possible. Humans reminded them that sometimes the best solution isn't the most elegant one. Sometimes it's the one that works, even if it requires a little grease, some creative thinking, and a lot of stubborn determination. And in a universe full of impossible problems, that made humans the most valuable engineers in the galaxy, not despite their primitive methods, but because of them. The end. Story message: sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the best one. Humans succeed not through superior technology, but through adaptability, stubbornness, and the refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. Our willingness to combine old wisdom with new ideas, to trust experience alongside data, makes us invaluable in a universe that favors specialization over versatility.